Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alexander Rowry, and today I will be presenting you with the research proposal regarding the FlexAlert Energy Conservation Program in California. This presentation should take approximately 15 minutes, and I'd also like to point out that I've included slide numbers on the lower right-hand corner of the screen for your note-taking purposes. This is a brief outline of what we'll be discussing today. Before getting into the proposal, it's first important to understand some crucial background information and history of energy issues in California. We'll also spend some time defining key players and definitions that will be discussed throughout the research proposal itself, and the majority of time will be spent discussing the research question and the proposed research methodology. Finally, we'll wrap up with discussing some of the predicted challenges and limitations of the proposal, as well as a summary of the major outlook and goals. California has a somewhat sordid past when it comes to energy management over the last quarter century. Deregulation and privatization of the energy trading market in the early 1990s led to mismanagement of generation needs, and eventually the decade saw an increase in energy demand of over 11% and a decrease in generation capacity of almost 2%, which resulted in a net deficit of 13% between supply and demand. The energy issue came to a head in May of 2000 when California's electricity crisis was seen on a national scale. On one extremely hot day, the California Independent System Operator, also known as the ISO, declared the first Stage 2 power alert in the history of the state, which means that reserves were less than 5%. Then on June 14th of 2000, California suffered its largest planned blackout since World War II. On a day when temperatures in San Francisco reached 103 degrees, a series of localized rolling blackouts affected 97,000 Pacific Gas and Electric customers throughout the Bay Area. The California ISO ordered the cuts because the supplies were low due to the closure of several plants for maintenance purposes. The rolling blackouts were declared in hopes to avoid major statewide uncontrolled blackouts. Then on December 7th of 2000, California faced an unprecedented energy alert again. Suffering from low supply and idle power plants, the California ISO declared the first statewide Stage 3 power alert, meaning that reserves were lower than 3%. Although the Stage 3 alert authorized the ISO to declare rolling blackouts, they were narrowly able to avoid them by halting production of 2 large state and federal water pumps in order to conserve electricity. In more recent history, California has passed 2 state laws that require retail energy production to reach 20% by 2010, which was a deadline that was met, and 33% by the year 2020. While renewable energy is great in the sense that it is quote-unquote renewable, it also comes with reliability and timing issues that were not as much of an issue with non-renewable energy sources. For example, if you look at the table below taken from the ISO Outlook website, which summarizes the renewable energy produced on December 1st of this year, you'll notice that solar energy production is maximized midday and peaks out at approximately 2,500 megawatts. Also note that wind generation barely reaches 100 megawatts at the very end of the day. Now let us fast forward 2 days to December 3rd and notice that the almost non-existent wind generation from the previous slide now greatly outproduces peak solar production throughout the majority of the day. This was the result of a winter storm in California, and it illustrates the unpredictable nature of some renewable energy sources. These past energy issues in California, coupled with the initiative to increase renewable energy production, make rapid conservation programs such as FlexAlerts necessary in order to avoid blackouts on short notice when energy demand comes dangerously close to supply. Now we'll discuss some key definitions of players that are crucial to understanding the research proposal. First, some of you might be wondering what a FlexAlert actually is. A FlexAlert is an urgent call to Californians to immediately conserve electricity and shift demand to off-peak hours. The FlexAlert campaign is an educational and emergency response program that informs consumers how and when to conserve electricity. It's important to note that the program relies solely on customer education. They advertise the program in many ways to include mailings to customers, radio advertisements, social media announcements, and traditional media outlets. The desired consumer response is actually quite simple, and it involves steps such as turning off unnecessary lights, adjusting thermostats, and avoiding the use of appliances until after peak demand periods, which is usually 6 p.m. Another interesting fact about the program is that it's privately funded by the 3 largest investor-owned utility companies in California, which are San Diego Gas and Electric, SoCal Edison, and Pacific Gas and Electric. You've already heard me mention the Independent System Operator, also known as ISO. They're a nonprofit group founded in 1992 charged with monitoring and managing the power grid in California. They're very similar to air traffic controllers, but instead of aircraft, they control the flow of electricity throughout the state. They're not partial to any particular power companies, and their main goal is smooth, uninterrupted power distribution for the state. The flowchart on the right-hand side helps explain the process. They accomplish this by forecasting power demand for 1 hour and 24 hours intervals ahead of time in order to ensure they have adequate resources available. In the event that demand levels come close to supply, they are the agency who is responsible for issuing flex alerts in order to avoid blackouts. As we've already noted, the Flex Alert program is funded by 3 utility companies, but the ISO is ultimately responsible for issuing a Flex Alert. Flex Alerts are issued, and then based on consumer awareness and educational levels, the power demand should decrease. They're issued via media, internet, direct notification, social media, and the Flex Alert network. It's also important to note that Flex Alerts can be issued at any time based on projected power supply and demand, but ideally they're designed to be most efficient when issued 24 hours in advance based on the energy forecast. This is an example of a Flex Alert that was issued in April of this year. This Flex Alert was issued due to a transmission loss in a specific area that was a result of vandalism. This further illustrates the fact that Flex Alerts can be issued for a number of reasons, such as unplanned outages, high peak demand, transmission line overloads and losses, and adverse, humid, hot weather and heat storms. Now we'll discuss my research question as well as my proposed methodology. So the research question is, do Flex Alerts impact energy consumption levels, and if so, how could the program be improved to further decrease energy consumption levels when Flex Alerts are issued? Moving on to proposed methodology. This is a summary of my proposed methodology divided up into 4 separate steps that will be discussed in detail in subsequent slides. These steps follow a logical order that should allow the research to build upon itself. So from the beginning, I plan on baselining the historical data. In order to do this, we'll need to send a request to the independent system operator for historical data for the years 2012 and 2013. We'll sort and divide the data into usable numerical value groups such as actual power demanded, 1 hour look ahead predictions, and the 24-hour look ahead predictions. After we have this data assembled, we need to analyze the prediction accuracy. In order to do this, I plan on using analysis of variance in order to see how accurate the predictions are on a regular basis. Once I've determined variance levels, I will compare the results to those observed during the time periods when Flex Alerts were issued. The table will then determine if there is a statistical correlation between Flex Alerts and consumption levels. After this step is complete, we'll move on to sampling, in which I intend to measure consumer behavior and consumption. In order to do this, we'll need to request customer information from San Diego Gas and Electric, Pacific Gas and Electric, and SoCal Edison utility companies. We'll then contact a sample group of customers in order to measure the knowledge level of Flex Alerts and subsequent behavior changes. We'll then combine this with our data findings from step 2 to leverage the findings to improve Flex Alert program. For this step, we'll segment consumers and behaviors based on observed energy consumption reactions, and we'll streamline the Flex Alert marketing campaign in order to focus on delivery methods that will maximize consumer response based on sampling results. So step 1, in further detail, is to baseline historical data. As mentioned previously, this step requires historical data in order to develop usable tables that consist of actual power demanded as well as the 1 hour and 24-hour predictions. The table to the right is an example of the ISO outlook for December 1st of this year. At first glance, it's fairly easy to compare the solid blue line, which is actual demand, to the dotted blue line, which is the 1 hour demand forecast. And the dotted magenta line indicates the predicted demand for the same time period, but 24 hours in the future. After sorting this data into different groups, I'll be ready to move on to step number 2. After the data is divided into usable tables, I plan to use analysis of variance in order to see how accurate the predictions are on a regular basis. Once I've determined the variance levels, I will compare the results to those observed during the same time periods when Flex Alerts are issued. The table on the right-hand side depicts the actual consumption levels observed during a Flex Alert that was issued on July 2nd of this year. Note the noticeable dip in consumption during the mid-afternoon time period, followed by a considerable bump in demand at approximately 2000, presumably when consumers are using appliances after peak demand periods, which is what is requested by the Flex Alert program. This step will be crucial to answering the first part of my research question, which was, do flex alerts impact energy consumption levels? The third step brings us to qualitative analysis, where I intend to measure the consumer behavior changes. In order to do this, I plan on conducting phone surveys, which will speak to the head of household. I intend to sample proportional population for all geographic areas due to the large size and differences in population density seen throughout California. And also need to ensure that interviewers are trained to ask approved questions and adhere to an interview script in order to standardize a survey and limit bias. Also, we'll need to ensure that there are multilingual interviewers available when needed. The clipboard on the right is 8 example questions which I've drafted. Still need to clean this up a little bit, but they're designed to determine overall familiarity and consumer response to the Flex Alert program. They're also designed to begin with less intrusive questions and end with the most intrusive questions should the interview terminate early. They are: have you heard of the Flex Alert program? How did you hear about the program? Do you change your behavior if and when you hear of a Flex Alert being issued? How do you modify your behavior specifically? Are you familiar with other power reduction incentives offered by your utility companies during peak usage time periods? What would be the most effective way to inform you of Flex Alerts in the future, be them radio, news media, social media, or other? What is your average monthly power bill? And what is your household annual income? Between the 3 power companies that fund the Flex Alert program, there's approximately 12 million customers in California that they serve. And I would like to do a survey that gets a 95% confidence level with a confidence interval of 2, meaning that within plus or minus 2% of 95% confidence. This would require me to have a sample size of about 2,500. The final step of the program would be my project would be to leverage findings to improve the Flex Alert program. In order to do this, I plan to identify the most effective method of information delivery based upon the survey results. We'll then make recommendations to tailor the Flex Alert delivery methods to specific geographical areas that target multiple demographics to maximize the effectiveness of the program. We'll make recommendations to the sponsor of the Flex Alert program based upon the findings. Now, there are some potential challenges and limitations to the research proposal so far. One of which is the fact that there is a very large consumer base with varying demographics across multiple geographies. In order to mitigate this, I intend to use proportional sampling to ensure that we cover all geographical areas within the state, and also sample enough consumers to where we get a high confidence level. Also, access to historical data and consumer information might be a challenge. If I have difficulty obtaining historical data from the ISO, I intend to get support from San Diego Gas and Electric, SoCal Edison, and Pacific Gas and Electric companies, as they're the ones who fund the program, and eventually could go to the California Energy Commission. Consumer information might be difficult from the companies. At a minimum, I need to know at least a zip code and contact information to get a hold of the consumers. There's also multiple campaign delivery methods to evaluate. I'll need to ensure that the survey is designed to encompass all the possible delivery methods. Also, there could be potential other possible reasons for significantly reduced power consumption during Flex Alert advisories, such as energy incentives given by the power companies themselves, which during summer months or particular times of the year, they offer a discounted energy rate for during off-peak time periods. So this might not cover all of the challenges and limitations that will be encountered throughout the research process, but at least it's something to think about going into the process that we've already considered. And lastly, to summarize, Flex Alerts rely on advertising campaigns that are designed to educate customers on how and when to conserve energy. This research proposal will determine whether or not Flex Alerts are historically effective in reducing energy consumption, and additionally, I hope to use data analytics to discover insights about consumer participation behavior and then leverage those insights to increase consumer response. The overall goal is to increase effectiveness of Flex Alerts by targeting key segments via the appropriate marketing channels. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions or comments about this presentation, please feel free to post them on a discussion board or contact me at my email address listed. Thank you very much. Have a good day.